My family operated a small antique shop, a life I had always known until the day everything changed. It turned out that a mistake had been made at the hospital the day I was born, and I had been part of a switched at birth scenario with the Sterlings, a family who were titans in the antique world. The day they arrived to bring their biological daughter home, I had fully expected that the girl they had raised in my place wouldn't bother to appear. To my surprise, she did. She arrived at our modest shop clutching a well worn copy of The Complete Guide to Antique Appraisal, her expression serious and focused. I, on the other hand, simply pushed my hands deep into the pockets of my jeans and climbed into the waiting luxury car without a word. My biological brother, a man with the imposing title of CEO who had come to collect me, cast a sideways glance in my direction. "Where is your luggage?" he asked, his voice even. I took a moment before answering. I was too lazy to pack it. "Isn't it enough that you're getting me?" My new brother, Adrian, seemed at a loss for words. I settled into the plush leather seat, buckled my seatbelt, found a position that was comfortable enough, and leaned back, closing my eyes. I made no further movement. The look Adrian gave me was a complex mixture of confusion and curiosity, as if he were trying to decipher a particularly challenging piece of abstract art. He was, I had been told, the president of the Sterling auction house, and I was the long-lost daughter who had been raised by the wrong family. My casual demeanor, as though I were merely on a school field trip, seemed to unnerve him, and he remained silent for a long while. When he finally spoke again, his question was quiet. "Don't you need to say goodbye to them?" Before I could form a response, a loud wail pierced the air. A blurry figure sprinted towards the car, his hands scrabbling at the window next to me. "Ilara! My one and only sister! You can't just leave like this!" he cried. He grabbed my hand through the open window and began to shake my arm with surprising strength. "I can't bear to see you go. What am I going to do without you?" I felt my body swaying with the motion, my head lolling back and forth like a piece of seaweed caught in a current. "It's okay, Liam. I'm gone now," I said, my eyes still closed. "If you need to talk to me, you can use a Ouija board." Liam paused his shaking for a fraction of a second, only to begin crying with even greater volume. "Sister, I still don't know if that painting is authentic or a forgery." His lament was cut short as he was abruptly lifted to his feet. Clara stood there holding a thick, spiral-bound notebook and adjusting the glasses on her nose. A determined glint seemed to flash from behind the lenses. "Liam, correct?" she began, her tone all business. "Your parents informed me that you are responsible for the care of the 8 pieces of blue and white porcelain in the shop." Her serious, interrogative manner made Liam instinctively straighten his posture, adopting the same solemn expression he used to reserve for his elementary school homeroom teacher. Yes, that's right. What about it?" he stammered. Clara flipped open her notebook with a crisp sound, produced a pen from her pocket, and began to write as she launched a volley of questions. "What time do you conduct your daily checks? What are the specific environmental conditions required for their preservation? What are the current temperature and humidity control settings? Is there any sign of abnormal wear or deterioration?" As the questions continued, one after another, Liam's mouth slowly fell open, his face a mask of complete bewilderment. Adrian, however, seemed to have anticipated something like this. He simply watched the scene unfold from the car, his expression impassive. I gave Clara a look of genuine surprise. For a young woman transitioning from a life of wealth and privilege to being the daughter of a small antique shop owner, she showed no signs of discontent. In fact, she seemed to be adapting to her new reality far more quickly than I was. Clara met my gaze and offered a polite, professional nod. I smiled faintly and gestured toward the still, dumbfounded Liam. "Liam is very useful," I said. "Anything you need done, just tell him." Clara's eyes lit up with possibility. She considered this for a moment, then stated bluntly, "The Sterlings, they are extremely wealthy." Both the Sterling brother and the Reed brother were left speechless. It was nearly 10 o'clock at night by the time we arrived at the Sterling family's villa, well beyond my usual bedtime. My eyelids felt heavy, and I was so tired I could have fallen asleep on my feet. Just as I stepped through the front door, however, a sickly sweet voice cut through my fatigue, jolting me fully awake. "Adrian, you're finally home. Miss May, please hurry and bring out the special soup I had you prepare." Adrian must be exhausted after such a long day on the road, He probably didn't even have a proper meal. A young woman in a beige silk dress seemed to float towards us, fluttering around Adrian with a deeply concerned frown. After a lengthy monologue directed at him, her attention finally shifted to me. She covered her mouth with her hand in a gesture of exaggerated surprise. "Oh, my sister! I am so sorry. I completely forgot about you." She glanced at me with a timid expression before turning her gaze back to Adrian. "Adrian, is this Ilara? Does this mean Clara really isn't coming back?" Adrian's face remained impassive. Where she chooses to go is her own decision. From this point forward, Ilara is your sister. He then turned to me. "This is Isabel. My mother sponsors her. She is essentially an adopted member of the family now." Isabel looked at me with a shy, anxious expression. "Ilara, I didn't realize you were coming today, so I haven't prepared anything for you. You aren't angry with me, are you?" I covered my mouth to stifle a wide yawn. My body was physically present, but my mind had already drifted off. "Are we finished here? If the introductions are over, I need to find somewhere to sleep." Adrian pinched the bridge of his nose, a hint of his own exhaustion showing on his handsome face. "She's tired from the journey. Take her to her room so she can rest." Isabel bit her lower lip. "But the room isn't ready yet." Adrian lowered his hand, his brow furrowing slightly. "What happened? Didn't I instruct you to have it prepared before I left?" His stern gaze shifted to Miss May, the housekeeper standing nearby. Isabel immediately jumped to her defense. "It's not Miss May's fault, it's mine. I thought that since my sister was returning, I should give her my room. But I have so many things, and I wasn't able to finish packing in time." As she spoke, she looked as though she might burst into tears at any moment. Adrian's frown deepened. "There are plenty of empty rooms upstairs. Just prepare one of those." "But my room gets the best sunlight," Isabel insisted. "My sister should have the very best now that she's home. It's all my fault. I should have moved my things out sooner. I shouldn't have taken such a nice room for myself in the first place. Why don't you let my sister sleep in my room for tonight? I can sleep anywhere, really." Isabel wiped away a tear and looked bravely in my direction, but her words trailed off. Adrian followed her gaze, and his own calm expression began to crack. There I was, leaning against the wall with my eyes closed, having been sound asleep for some time. I slept soundly until noon the following day, waking up in a room that was entirely unfamiliar. I felt no sense of panic. I remembered one time when I was a little girl, I had gone with my dad on a late-night trip to acquire a new antique. On the drive back in the early morning hours, I was so tired I couldn't keep my eyes open. I saw a large haystack on the side of the road, and without a second thought, I flopped down onto it and fell fast asleep. My dad had been walking just ahead of me, and when he turned around, his rather large daughter had simply vanished. The experience scared him half to death. My mom nagged him about that incident for over a month, and my little brother, Liam, was given a new chore as a result. His primary job became watching over me to make sure I didn't just fall asleep wherever I happened to be. When I eventually made my way downstairs, Adrian and Isabel were already seated at the dining table. Adrian looked up as I entered and seemed to let out a quiet sigh of relief. He had apparently never encountered someone who could sleep so deeply, like a corpse, completely unresponsive to any attempt to be woken. He later admitted that if he hadn't checked to make sure I was still warm, he would have dragged me to the hospital. After I sat down, Adrian asked a few concerned questions about how I had slept and told me to make a list of anything I needed so he could have his assistant purchase it for me. Across the table, Isabel bit her lip, looking as though she was bursting with things to say. I, of course, had no intention of initiating a conversation. Anyone who managed to get an extra word out of me was a true champion. Liam had practically gotten on his knees and begged me to talk to him before. Once the food was served, I picked at the single dish placed directly in front of me, eating slowly and deliberately. Adrian glanced at me once, then again, and finally couldn't contain his curiosity. "There's so much food. Why are you only eating that one dish?" He paused, his tone softening slightly. "This is your home now. You don't need to be shy. Eat whatever you like." It was as if Isabel had been waiting for this exact cue. She immediately began piling food onto my plate. Ilara, you've probably never had dishes like these before. You should try a little of everything. I know your family runs a small antique shop. She let out a small, ah, and covered her mouth, blinking at me with wide eyes. Ilara, I didn't mean it that way. I'm not looking down on people who run antique shops. It's just that living in a place like that, you must have had a difficult time. But now that you're back with the Sterlings, things are different. Just tell me what you'd like to eat, and I'll make sure Miss May prepares it for you. She stared at me, clearly expecting some kind of reaction. I just offered a flat, "Oh, thanks." She waited a moment longer, the smile on her face beginning to look strained. After a moment, I turned to Adrian. "It's too far. It's tiring to lift my arm." Adrian paused, taking a second to realize I was finally answering his earlier question. He looked torn between amusement and exasperation. "It's just lifting your arm." My phone began to buzz with a rapid series of notifications. Someone was messaging me repeatedly. Seeing that I was making no move to check it, Adrian gave me a gentle nudge. "Aren't you going to look at that?" "Don't need to," I said without looking up, focusing on my food. Isabel's eyes flickered. She suddenly reached over, picked up my phone, and put on an expression of deep concern. "What if it's an emergency?" "Ilara, even though you're back with the Sterlings now, you can't just cut off everyone from your past." With that, she casually unlocked my phone, and a series of desperate cries instantly filled the dining room. "Sis, save me. For the love of God, save me. This woman is a demon. She stays up all night writing business plans for antique collections. She wrote a hundred rules just for maintaining the blue and white porcelain. And she said she wants to expand our shop, open a new branch in 6 months, and go public in 3 years. She dragged me out of bed at 6 o'clock this morning to make me appraise every single antique. And then she made me study the characteristics of porcelain from different dynasties. I don't want to spend the rest of my life tied to antiques, and I especially don't want to be the heir to an antique empire, even if it goes public." The string of frantic messages echoed through the living room, painting a vivid picture of Liam's complete mental breakdown. An awkward silence descended upon the room. Adrian, sitting beside me, straightened his back. "I'm finished eating. You two take your time." He stood up and strode out the door to work, looking as if he had just received a sudden injection of adrenaline. And Isabel, who was usually so full of drama, became quiet and subdued. I looked on thoughtfully. That girl I was swapped with, the former Sterling heiress and now Liam's biological sister, she was truly intimidating. Under Liam's relentless barrage of messages, I came to understand just what a machine Clara was. Not only did she pull all-nighters to write business plans, but she also immediately began renovating the shop, implementing scientific management and targeted marketing strategies. She was also completely willing to get her hands dirty, personally visiting my dad's old contacts in the antique world to help appraise items for 3 days before launching her grand overhaul. And the results were undeniable. The revamped shop was a significant improvement, and business was much better than before. The only person suffering was Liam, who had become the sole soldier under Clara's command. But that wasn't even the most terrifying part. The most terrifying part was that the family's antique shop was just a side project for Clara. Her main job was as a project team leader at the Sterling's auction house. It was a position she had applied for after turning 18, working her way up from an entry-level role without anyone knowing she was a Sterling. Absolutely terrifying. I suddenly understood the sense of urgency Adrian felt that morning. With a superstar sister like that around, constantly threatening his position as CEO, how could he ever relax? But now that he had me, his slacker sister, he probably didn't have to worry about that anymore. My CEO brother went to work to support the family, and I collapsed onto the sofa to play on my phone. Isabel finished her zither practice. I was still on the sofa. Isabel finished her calligraphy lesson. I was still on the sofa. Isabel was learning the art of tea with Miss May. I rolled over. "Ilara, you—" Isabel walked over to me, holding a freshly brewed cup of tea, and hesitated. My fingers were tapping away on my phone's screen, completely oblivious to the person who had appeared beside me. A flash of annoyance crossed Isabel's pretty face, and her voice suddenly rose. "Ilara, the Sterlings may be wealthy, but We should still strive to better ourselves and not waste our lives. She paused, bit her lip, and continued. Perhaps the environment you grew up in was so poor that you've never seen truly exceptional people. Your perspective is limited, and you've gotten used to the aimless, dead end lifestyle of the lower class, but she suddenly raised her voice, clenching her fists and staring at me angrily. That's no excuse to let yourself go. I looked up, confused. What was she talking about? Isabel frowned and was about to say more when a familiar voice came from my phone's speaker. She has always been like this. She can't get to the point, her logic is a mess, and her meaning is always vague. On the other end of the line, Clara paused before adding with a bit more emphasis, Isabel, were all those years of English class a waste? How did your teachers even teach you? Or is it a problem with how you learn? How can a grown person not even know how to speak clearly? You see, Clara, Isabel's face paled. Her body went rigid, and she stood up straight out of pure instinct. Clara's words seemed to strike a nerve. She turned and walked away looking utterly dejected. Over the phone, Clara thanked me. The software you made is great. Liam was right. You're really good at this. I gave a non-committal grunt in response. Before hanging up, Clara seemed to remember something and added a reminder. Mr. and Mrs. Sterling, your parents, will be back in a few days. They are very different from your parents at the Reeds. You should probably be mentally prepared. Different how? Are they not human? I thought about it for 2 seconds and then promptly forgot. My life at the Sterlings was no different from my life at the Reeds. I just had a new place to lie down. But the large sofa in the Sterlings' living room was truly amazing. For the past few days, aside from going upstairs to sleep, I'd barely left it. I actually wanted to sleep on the sofa, but Adrian caught me in the act when he came down for a drink of water one night. He banished me back to my bedroom and even personally escorted me to my door to make sure I wouldn't sneak back out. These years at the Reeds, he looked like he wanted to say something, but in the end, he just pinched the bridge of his nose. Never mind, just get some sleep. Over the past few days, Adrian had gotten a thorough education on the difference between a slacker and a normal human being. I could hold the same position for hours without moving. The day I arrived, Adrian gave me a credit card with a monthly allowance of $30,000, but it was a joke. In the days since, I hadn't even stepped out the front door, let alone spent any money. It was only because Adrian was home today that he realized how carelessly I was living. It was the kind of existence where, if left unattended, I might accidentally waste away. He really couldn't stand it anymore, so he started manually flipping me over. No, I mean, helping me correct my unhealthy lifestyle. One minute he was pulling me up to stretch my arms and legs, the next he was telling me I couldn't stare at a screen for too long and needed to look at something in the distance. He was driving me crazy, so I finally took the initiative to ask him why he was home. Alex paused, about to say something, when the sound of a car outside made him fall silent. Isabel, who had been practicing the piano upstairs, came running down happily and threw herself into a woman's arms like a baby bird returning to its nest. Mom, Dad, you're back. I missed you so much. The woman hugged her, calling her sweetheart, while the man next to her joined in. The three of them were a picture of affection, exchanging warm and loving words. Mrs. Sterling excitedly recounted tales from their trip while showing off various gifts. Isabel played her part perfectly, gasping with a wow every now and then, providing an enthusiastic reaction. The mother and daughter were still chattering away at the dinner table, with Mr. Sterling watching them with a smile. It was a perfectly harmonious scene that made me and Adrian feel completely out of place. Adrian was particularly quiet today. He glanced at me, his eyes seeming to hold a hint of reassurance. Adrian looked at Isabel, who was happily showing off her gifts, and said in a low voice, "That's enough. We're eating now. You can take those gifts to your room and open them after dinner." Then he turned to Mrs. Sterling, his tone softening slightly. "Mom, this is your first time meeting Alara. Shouldn't you give her a gift too?" Mrs. Sterling let out a long, regretful, "Oh." She had just remembered my existence. She slapped her forehead, wanting to give me something, but Isabel had already opened all the gifts she'd brought back. Not one to fuss, she simply took one from Isabel's hands. "Ilara, this is for you. Mommy forgot to buy you something, but I'll make it up to you next time." Mr. Sterling added, "Just take what your mother is giving you. We didn't forget you on purpose. You just slipped our minds for a moment." I thought that if Clara were here, she would definitely say that Mr. Sterling also needed to retake his English classes, or perhaps he majored in talking in circles. I didn't take the gift. I don't want a gift someone else has already opened. My words instantly sent a chill through the dining room. Mrs. Sterling looked a bit lost and said sadly, "Alara, are you mad at Mommy? I didn't do it on purpose. I'll make it up to you next time, okay?" Mr. Sterling slammed his chopsticks on the table, his face sinking. "Where are your manners? Is that how you speak to your mother?" Alex massaged his temples, the frustration practically radiating off him. In the suffocating silence, Isabel spoke up timidly. "I don't want the gifts anymore. Just give them all to my sister." Mrs. Sterling's heart immediately went out to her. She took her hand and soothed her. "Sweetheart, you're the most considerate one. Tell Mommy what you like, and I'll buy it all for you." "Okay, thank you, Mommy." The mother and daughter spoke affectionately, and the storm seemed to pass just like that. After dinner, the family sat in the living area to relax and chat. Well, mainly Mr. and Mrs. Sterling were chatting with Isabel. Adrian was on his laptop dealing with work while I reclaimed my designated spot on the sofa with my phone. Mrs. Sterling glanced disapprovingly at me and Adrian, feeling that we weren't as filial as Isabel. She and Mr. Sterling had been traveling for days, and upon their return, we didn't even bother to ask how they were or chat with them. Mr. Sterling nodded in agreement with his wife. He even said that it was the same when Clara was around. She was cold and a workaholic, just like her brother, with no consideration for her parents. That's why they had adopted Isabel. Now their biological daughter was back, and she wasn't fawning over them either, showing more affection to her phone than to them. Thank goodness they had adopted one, otherwise they would never get to enjoy the filial piety of their children. Hearing this, I was completely speechless. I looked over at Adrian, who had a calm expression. Clearly, this was a familiar tune, and he was used to it. Somehow, the conversation drifted to my schooling. They asked me which school I went to. Isabel was my age, a senior at the prestigious Silver Creek High. Just mentioning the school brought an unstoppable look of pride to her face, and Mrs. Sterling looked equally pleased. My hands never stopped moving on my phone as I casually replied, "Oh, I'm a professional homebody." Mrs. Sterling was still puzzling over which top school professional homebody was when Isabel let out a ft of laughter. Seeing everyone look at her, she covered her mouth and apologized. "I'm sorry, Alara. I didn't mean to laugh. It's just the way you said you're a homebody instead of saying you dropped out of school." She looked like she was about to laugh again. Mrs. Sterling's voice became sharp. "You're not in school?" "Nope," I replied without looking up. I couldn't be bothered with school. I've been self-taught since I was a kid and never attended a single class. At first, my parents, the Reeds, had hoped I could go to school like other kids. But after I made the teacher and the entire class cry on my very first day, that idea was permanently shelved. Later, it was Liam who said there was a wall between gods and mortals, and forcing a deity to hang out with regular people was uncomfortable for everyone involved. He got a beating for that. So, I've never been to school for a single day. But for the past 2 years, Principal Davies has been trying to persuade me to enroll at his school. Especially this year, with the SATs coming up, he hoped I could take them as an official student. By now, Mrs. Sterling was discussing with her husband, her face grim, about getting me into Isabel's school. The Sterling family couldn't have an illiterate member who'd never even been to school. If word got out, they'd be a laughingstock, and she'd be too embarrassed to show her face. Even if they just got me into the school for show, it was better than me hiding at home playing games all day. Isabel listened intently from the side, then said with a worried expression, "But Alara has never been to school. Will she be able to keep up?" Mrs. Sterling looked hesitant, but Mr. Sterling's face was stern. At her age, she can only be a senior. Does she want to be held back a year? After the SATs, we'll just throw her into some university abroad to at least get a degree. It'll be better for appearances. They made the decision right in front of me without even thinking to ask for my opinion. Adrian was silent the whole time. He frowned and looked at me as if he wanted to say something, but ultimately didn't. Mr. Sterling made the final call. I happen to have a bit of sway with Principal Davies at Silver Creek. It shouldn't be a problem to ask him to take on one more student. He finished, and seeing me still staring at my phone, a look of disgust and regret flashed in his eyes. If he had known, he would have been better off not acknowledging this daughter. Meanwhile, I was chatting with someone. I typed. I said yes. Old Davies, the reply came. Said yes to what? Old Davies, I replied. To coming to Silver Creek. Old Davies, he typed back. You're finally willing to get off your couch? Mrs. Sterling took me to the school to handle my enrollment. Isabel led the way, occasionally pointing out buildings and giving introductions. She was clearly very familiar with the place, speaking about it with great affection. I followed behind with my hands in my pockets, casually looking around. I matched what I saw with what Principal Davies had told me. Although it was my first time here, Principal Davies had praised the school from top to bottom countless times, trying to convince me to come. I even knew what the most popular dish in the cafeteria was. The vice principal received us personally. He apologized, explaining that Principal Davies was away on a business trip, but that everything he'd been asked to do was already taken care of. With that, he produced my student ID. Mrs. Sterling was surprised, almost flattered. Although the Sterlings were the richest family in the antique world, given Principal Davies' status, they couldn't really do anything if he chose not to give them face. But here was the vice principal receiving them, and from the sound of it, if Principal Davies hadn't been out of town, he might have met them himself. Mrs. Sterling looked at Isabel with satisfaction, feeling that this was partly due to Isabel's own merit. It was because of Isabel's excellence, combined with the Sterlings' wealth, that the principal of Silver Creek was giving them special treatment. The paperwork was completed quickly. In the middle of it, the vice principal stepped out to take a call. When he returned, he said that Principal Davies was on his way back and that if they weren't in a hurry, they could wait here. The principal wanted to meet them personally. Mrs. Sterling was even more astonished. She eagerly agreed, taking Isabel's hand with a broad smile. Our Isabel has been so well taken care of by you all. As parents, we feel completely at ease in trusting her education to your school. The vice principal smiled and returned the compliment. Isabel is a bright and generous student with top grades in the school. You're very fortunate. Hearing others praise her child, Mrs. Sterling was overjoyed. They chatted enthusiastically while I, the actual subject of the visit, was left on the sidelines. Seeing that the formalities were done, I took my student ID and walked out of the office. Just then, my phone rang. I pulled it out and saw a new message. Old Davies, I'm half an hour out. Wait for me. Gone. Old Davies, no. I could almost picture a frantic old man in my head. I quickly shook the image away. What was the point of seeing an old man? The thought of starting a miserable life as a student was already making my food less tasty. At dinner that night, Mrs. Sterling bragged about the school enrollment process. She made sure to emphasize that the principal had met with them personally and had even praised Isabel. Our Isabel is just so outstanding. Alara really benefited from Isabel's influence this time. Otherwise, things wouldn't have gone so smoothly. Mr. Hamilton nodded in satisfaction. Indeed, the school didn't even ask for anything in return. I imagine it's because Isabel is a student there. Silver Creek has early admission spots for Yale every year. The application process should be starting around now, right? Isabel said demurely. I've already applied. The results aren't out yet. The smile never left Mrs. Sterling's face as she showered Isabel with praise, saying she was sure to get the spot. They spoke as if the early admission was already in Isabel's pocket. Adrian, who had been quiet the whole time, suddenly spoke up. Getting into Yale through Silver Creek isn't that easy. Isabel's grades are a little borderline, aren't they? Mrs. Sterling's face immediately fell. What do you mean, borderline? Even Principal Davies had nothing but praise for her, she said, displeased. I chewed on my chopsticks and looked up at Isabel. Old man, Principal Davies? Did he really accept me because of you? Isabel's eyes flickered, but she maintained a poised and elegant smile. It was mainly because of the Sterling family's reputation. After all, you are a Sterling daughter, Alara. Mrs. Sterling frowned at me. But it was still Isabel who smoothed things over. Because she's a student at Silver Creek, it was easier for them to accept you. You should be thanking Isabel, not questioning her like this. Seeing Mrs. Sterling getting angry, Isabel took her hand and gently soothed her. It's all right, Mom. Alara has never been to school, so she probably doesn't know how hard it is to get into Silver Creek. The rice in my bowl suddenly lost its flavor. I found myself missing the Reeds' home. Even the crowing of the rooster in the backyard was more pleasant than this. After sorting out the school admission, Mr. and Mrs. Sterling seemed to forget I existed. They were constantly taking Isabel out shopping or to banquets. When Isabel was praised at these events, Mrs. Sterling was as happy as if she had won the lottery. In contrast, her biological son Adrian worked diligently like a horse every day, but rarely received a kind word from her. If her own son, who had been by her side for over 20 years, was treated like this, I, the daughter who had just been brought back into the fold, was even less of a priority. But I was perfectly fine with that. After several days of relentless pestering from Liam, I finally sent him an invitation code. It was for a little app I had made myself, which Principal Davies later promoted, making it popular within certain circles. Anyone who wanted to join not only had to pass an assessment, but also needed an internal invitation code. Liam had been dying to get into this app for a long time. He had finally passed the assessment a while back and had been begging me for a code ever since. Oh well, if the rookie enjoys getting crushed, I might as well indulge him. That evening, Mrs. Sterling was taking Isabel to another banquet. When Isabel saw me lying on the sofa, a thought flashed in her eyes. She tugged on her mother's arm and pleaded softly, "Mom, can we take Alara with us? She's always cooped up at home. She'll get sick if she doesn't go out." Mrs. Sterling glanced at me. Seeing me engrossed in my phone without even looking up, her eyebrows knitted together. Tonight is the Vance's party. All the important people will be there. Look at her, glued to her phone all day. What kind of impression will she make? She'll just embarrass the family. Mrs. Sterling felt I wasn't presentable and naturally didn't want to take me out. To her, children, whether biological or adopted, were like beautiful clothes or expensive jewelry, things to be worn out to please herself and win the praise of others. They also had to be comfortable and fit perfectly to be considered acceptable. Otherwise, they were defective. Clearly, among the 4 children, Isabel was the only one she considered qualified. So, at Isabel's insistence, Mrs. Sterling reluctantly agreed to take me. When we arrived at the Vance's house, Mrs. Sterling initially kept me by her side. When someone asked who I was, she would explain my identity, and I would receive a few looks of ambiguous meaning. But unlike the sweet-talking Isabel, I would just politely greet people and nothing more. Not a single extra word. Mrs. Sterling's face grew darker and darker. Eventually, she left me behind, gave a few instructions, and walked off with Isabel. Isabel glanced back at me, a clear look of triumph in her eyes. Tsk, so boring. I grabbed some food, found a quiet corner, and pulled out my phone again. But the peace was quickly shattered. Hey, you're that real daughter the Sterlings just got back, right? You're not all that. You can't even compare to Isabel. A group of people approached me, the boy in the lead looking at me provocatively. I lifted my eyelids slightly, ignored them, and went back to my phone. The boy felt like he'd lost face. "I'm talking to you. I heard your family used to run an antique shop. No wonder you have no manners." He sneered. "You probably spent all your time with dusty old things. Now you're at a high-end event like this and don't even know what to do with yourself, right? That's why you're hiding here playing on your phone." Without looking up, I said, "It's the same as being here." The boy didn't get it at first. It took a nudge from someone next to him to realize I'd just insulted him. He instantly became furious. The commotion drew attention. Before long, Mrs. Sterling appeared with Isabel. Seeing the situation, she frowned instinctively. "Alara, didn't I tell you not to cause trouble? Why are you so thoughtless? Don't you know where you are?" I put down my phone and looked up at her, explaining seriously. He started it. The boy defended himself, saying he was just being friendly and trying to say hello, but I ignored him and insulted him. The people around him all chimed in to agree. I didn't even look down on her for being some girl from an antique shop, but she insulted me. Hmm, just as I thought, straight from the countryside. No class at all. Mrs. Sterling felt her face burn. She had never been so humiliated, especially seeing me acting like nothing was wrong. Still looking down at my phone, a rush of anger went to her head. She snatched the phone out of my hand, threw it on the floor, and sputtered, "All you do is play on that phone. You completely ignore everything I say. Why did I have to have a daughter like you?" She clutched her chest, looking like she was about to faint from anger. Isabel quickly rushed to support her. Others tried to smooth things over, saying that kids these days are just rebellious and so on. I stared down at the phone on the floor, silent. A fair, slender hand picked up the phone and held it out to me. "Here. Luckily, it's not broken." He winked at me and smiled warmly. "You play this app too. You seem really good. We should exchange notes sometime." The young man's appearance quieted the surroundings. Mrs. Sterling was slightly stunned. "Mr. Vance, what are you—" The newcomer was the host of the party, the heir to the Vance Corporation, Ethan Vance. "Mrs. Sterling, your daughter isn't just playing some ordinary game. This app was jointly developed by several top universities, including Silver Creek. Anyone who makes it onto the leaderboard is practically guaranteed a spot at a top college." Mrs. Sterling's mind was struggling to catch up. "Playing an app can get you into a top college?" Ethan's tone was regretful. "Even though I had a top SAT score back in the day, I could only ever rank second on this app." He glanced at me as he said it. I blinked blankly. A buzz of conversation erupted. The boy from before stared in shock. "Bro, are you saying she has an invitation code for that app? That's impossible." Everyone's attention was suddenly captured by the app Ethan mentioned. The boy was a huge fan of the app, though he had yet to get an invitation code himself. He was an even bigger admirer of the person who perennially occupied the #1 spot on the leaderboard. M is so mysterious. I wonder if I'll ever get to meet them in my lifetime. I gave him a cool glance. Heh. On the way back, Isabel was still buzzing about the app, her voice filled with excitement. Mr. Sterling asked about it with interest, and she immediately recounted the events of the evening. At the end, she said with a look of longing, "That M is so amazing. I heard they've been #1 since the very beginning, but no one knows their real identity." Mr. Sterling casually guessed, "If they're as incredible as you say, they're probably a university professor." Isabel looked at him seriously and shook her head. "No, Dad. The rules of the app state that users can't be over 20 years old." The three of them chatted affectionately. I yawned and headed upstairs. As I passed Adrian's room, I glanced in. The diligent CEO hadn't returned yet. Downstairs, none of the three mentioned him. How pitiful. We were pitifully in the same boat. It was supposed to be a family of 5, but 2 of us were always nameless. It used to be Clara. Now it was me. At that moment, I think I understood why Clara had so decisively returned to the Reed family after learning she wasn't a real Sterling. Soon, it was time to start school. I was placed in Isabel's class. Isabel was surprised to see me, as it was an honors class. Although I had promised Principal Davies I would come to school, I still slept when I wanted to and played on my phone when I wanted to. On the first day of school, Principal Davies came to the classroom to see me. After confirming that I was indeed a student at Silver Creek, he walked away satisfied, hands clasped behind his back. Before leaving, he specifically instructed the teacher not to disturb my sleep. My performance was reported home by Isabel every day, and naturally, Mr. and Mrs. Sterling grew more and more disappointed in me. Adrian did, however, try to have a serious talk with me once. I casually pulled out a test paper, finished it on the spot, and handed it to him. He never brought up my studies again. Time passed like this, and then the school's early admission list was announced. Isabel's name was not on it. Mine, however, was there, in bold. When Isabel came home and told them, the house instantly erupted. "It must be a mistake. Did they mix up Alara's name with Isabel's?" Mrs. Sterling said instinctively. Isabel's eyes welled up and she bit her lip, looking like she was fighting back tears. This broke Mrs. Sterling's heart. Convinced the school had made an error, she declared she was going to find the principal and demand they give the spot back to Isabel. Mr. Sterling frowned but remained silent, though he also didn't believe I could have earned the spot. Only Adrian spoke a word of reason. Lara's grades are excellent. It's not surprising that she would qualify for early admission. But his words stirred up a hornet's nest. Isabel burst into tears. I know I'm just adopted and Alara is your real sister. That's why you're always on her side. This was never my home. Maybe I should have left a long time ago. With that, she ran to her room, wiping away tears. Mrs. Sterling scolded Adrian before rushing after her to comfort her. Mr. Sterling also looked at his son with reproach. Is that any way for a brother to act? Your sister is heartbroken, and instead of comforting her, you make her cry. Adrian glanced at me, who had been silent through it all, then looked up at his father, his gaze heavy. Dad, Ilara is my sister, too. And so is Clara. They are your daughters. You and Mom can see Isabel's hurt, but why can't you see them? Mr. Sterling's expression faltered for a moment before he erupted in anger. Are you questioning me? He glared. Adrian met his gaze without backing down. In the end, it was the father who lost the standoff. His son was an adult, and he had inherited the family business from his grandfather. While he was the father and could pull rank occasionally, he didn't dare to truly go head-to-head with Adrian. He ended up muttering a few platitudes and storming off, his retreating figure looking suspiciously like a hasty escape. Adrian's gaze shifted to me. He hesitated, then reached out and ruffled my hair, smiling warmly. Ilara, congratulations! Honestly, I didn't care about the early admission spot. Principal Davies must have signed me up for it. Feeling the warmth on my head, I smiled back at Adrian and for the first time, said the word, thanks, bro. Just as expected, Mr. and Mrs. Sterling took Isabel to see the principal. Worried, Adrian skipped work and went with them to the school. With the early admission being questioned, the school took it very seriously, gathering the relevant teachers and students as witnesses. Principal Davies looked at Isabel with a stern expression. Are you suggesting the early admission results are fraudulent? Isabel hid behind Mrs. Sterling, not daring to meet the principal's eyes, and mumbled with her head down. I'm not saying the spot is fake, it's just Ilara has never even been to school. How could she possibly qualify? Maybe the school made a mistake somewhere. I just don't want my sister to take someone else's spot. That wouldn't be fair to them. Her words caused a stir, and all sorts of strange looks were directed at me. Adrian frowned slightly and moved to stand in front of me. Principal Davies looked deeply at Isabel, then turned his gaze to Mr. and Mrs. Sterling. Ilara is your daughter. Others might question her, but how can you, as her parents, not believe in her? Mrs. Sterling pursed her lips and said righteously, They are both my daughters. I'm not taking sides. I just want a fair outcome. A fair outcome, you say? Principal Davies chuckled softly and didn't say more. He laid out a file of documents for everyone to see. Who told you that you can't learn if you don't go to school? Some super geniuses aren't suited for traditional schooling. 1 year of self-study for them is worth more than 10 years in school for others. These are the certificates and awards Ilara has won since she was a child. Most of them are from national-level competitions or higher, and she's won gold every time. That alone is enough to get her into any university in the country. These are the journal articles Ilara has published since she was 12, and her 23 patents. And the most insignificant of these is this little app she created when she was 9. Principal Davies took out his phone and opened it. A familiar app appeared on the screen. Isabel, who had already been listening in a daze, turned deathly pale, her body swaying as if she couldn't stand. She's not a regular genius. Her brain is one of humanity's most precious treasures. If she wanted to, she could get a degree from any university in the world right now. An early admission spot? She couldn't care less about it. I was the one who wanted to give it to her. The room was utterly silent. For a moment, no one spoke. Mr. and Mrs. Sterling were the most shocked of all, staring at me blankly, having forgotten how to react. This daughter, the one they had thought the least of, turned out to be such a genius. They were at a loss, especially Mrs. Sterling, who looked like she wanted to approach me but didn't dare. In the silence, I tilted my head and looked at Principal Davies. Old Man Davies. The principal gave me a playful, scolding look, his face beaming. Mind your manners, call me Grandpa. I obliged. Grandpa Davies, does this mean I don't have to come to class anymore? The principal smiled benevolently. Yes, but you still have to show up for exams. I nodded casually and started walking out. The crowd parted like the Red Sea, clearing a path for me. At the school gate, Adrian was standing by his car, watching me silently. I didn't walk over to him. Just then, Mrs. Sterling caught up. Alara, wait for Mom. You walk so fast, child. She came toward me with a chiding smile, trying to take my hand. Why didn't you tell your father and me? If you had told us sooner, we wouldn't have made this pointless trip to the school today. Are you hungry? Mom and Dad will take you out for a nice meal today, and then we'll go shopping. Mommy will buy you whatever you want. Mr. Sterling stood nearby, his silence a show of support for his wife. Behind them, Isabel stood with a ghostly white face, tears welling in her eyes, looking like she was about to collapse. I sidestepped Mrs. Sterling's hand. The smile on her face froze slightly. No thanks. I'm going home. Mrs. Sterling forced a smile. If you're tired and want to rest, that's fine. Let's get in the car then. She opened the door of the luxury car next to Adrian. I didn't move. The smile on Mrs. Sterling's face grew more and more strained, on the verge of cracking, when suddenly a cheerful shout rang out. Sis, I'm here to pick you up. A second-hand van pulled up nearby. Liam was grinning like a fool, waving at me vigorously through the window. In the driver's seat, Clara had one hand on the steering wheel and the other adjusting her glasses. She shot a cool glance over. When her eyes swept over Mr. and Mrs. Sterling, they were completely devoid of emotion. I gave Adrian a casual wave. Bro, come visit sometime. I'll treat you to some of Clara's pastries. With that, I stuffed my hands in my pockets and walked towards the van. Adrian watched my retreating back, which showed no sign of looking back, and remembered our first conversation. He muttered to himself, So that's what you meant by just bringing yourself. Inside the van, Clara glanced at me in the rearview mirror. Back to the Reeds. I shook my head. Find a place with Wi-Fi. I have to take care of something. Liam leaned over curiously. What is it, sis? I pulled out my phone. The screen showed dozens of unread messages, all from the same person. Ethan Vance. He was a friend I'd met on the app and the only person who could ever threaten my top spot on the leaderboard. He had always wanted to know M's real identity, and I was also quite curious about this mysterious rival. Meeting up with someone, I said coolly. Clara glanced at me in the rearview mirror, a faint smile playing on her lips. That Ethan Vance who's been chasing you? I nodded. It was time to meet this legendary genius. Half an hour later, we were at a coffee shop downtown. I had sent Ethan the location, asking him to meet me here. Just as we sat down at a window seat, a familiar figure walked through the door. Tall, with a handsome face, it was Ethan Vance, the guy from the party. He looked around and his eyes finally landed on me, a flash of surprise in them. M? He asked tentatively. I nodded. Ethan Vance. He was stunned for a few seconds, then burst out laughing. So it was you. No wonder you didn't react at all when you heard the name M that day. After sitting down, he studied me with great interest. I never thought the legendary M would turn out to be the long-lost Sterling heiress. You knew my identity all along? I asked. I only just confirmed it, Ethan said, picking up his coffee. But thinking back now, it all makes sense. What makes sense? Why you always turned down my invitations and why you were always so good at the antique appraisal questions? He smiled. A genius from a family of antique dealers. It fits perfectly. I looked at him calmly. So you asked to meet just to confirm my identity? Not just that. Ethan's smile faded, and his expression turned serious. I want to invite you to join my team. What team? A project team dedicated to the digital preservation of ancient artifacts. His eyes shone with excitement. We're developing a brand new antique appraisal system, and we need a genius like you. I was silent for a moment. The proposal was genuinely interesting, much more so than lying at home playing on my phone. What are the terms? You can work from home, no need to come into the office. You get 30% of the project's profits, plus a monthly salary. Sounds good, I nodded. I'll consider it. Ethan let out a visible sigh of relief. That's great. I'll send you the detailed information as soon as possible. Just then, the coffee shop door opened again. Adrian hurried in, his eyes scanning the crowd, and quickly found me. He strode over, his face a little grim. Alara, what are you doing here? Getting coffee, I answered simply. Adrian's gaze fell on Ethan, and his eyes immediately became wary. Mr. Vance, fancy meeting you here. Mr. Sterling, Ethan nodded politely. I was just discussing a potential collaboration with your sister. A collaboration? Adrian frowned. Alara is still in school. She doesn't have time for any projects. Bro, I looked up at him. I can make my own decisions. Adrian was taken aback, seemingly not expecting me to contradict him so directly. Alara, you're still young. Some things? I'm 18. I cut him off. Legally, I'm an adult. Ethan watched the sibling exchange with an amused glint in his eye. Finally, Adrian sighed. Fine, but you have to discuss any decisions with me first. Okay, I nodded. At that moment, Clara pushed open the door and walked straight to our table. Alara, Liam's getting impatient in the car. We should go. Her arrival surprised all three of them. Ethan was the first to react, standing up and extending his hand. Miss Reed, a pleasure to finally meet you. Clara shook his hand politely. The pleasure is all mine, Mr. Vance. Adrian's expression was more complex, his gaze toward Clara filled with a hint of inquiry. Clara, what are you? I'm here to take Alara home, Clara said coolly. I trust you have no objections, Mr. Sterling? Adrian opened his mouth, but in the end, said nothing. I stood up and said to Ethan, email me the files, I'll seriously consider it. Of course, Ethan nodded. I look forward to our collaboration. As we walked out of the coffee shop, Clara suddenly asked, what terms did he offer you? 30% of the project profits, plus a salary. Not enough, Clara said, pushing up her glasses. With your skills, you should be asking for at least 50%. I turned my head to look at her. You know a lot about this stuff. It's just business negotiation, she said dismissively. You're too easily satisfied. People will take advantage of you. Liam poked his head out of the car window. Sis, what are you guys talking about? Hurry up and get in. I'm starving. Back at the Reed's place, my adoptive parents were busy in the shop. Seeing us return, my mom wiped her hands and came out. Ilara's back. Have you eaten? Not yet. Then hurry and wash your hands. I made sweet and sour pork ribs. Sitting at the familiar dining table, eating the familiar food, I suddenly felt a sense of peace. My dad put down his work and sat down with us. Alara, I heard you got an early admission spot at school. Yeah, that's amazing. My dad's face beamed with pride. That's our girl. My mom shot him a look. What do you mean, our girl? She's a Sterling. In my heart, Alara will always be our girl, my dad said seriously. A warmth spread through my chest, and the corners of my mouth turned up unconsciously. This is what a family feels like. No need to prove anything, no need to act exceptionally brilliant. Just to be accepted and loved for who you are. Clara watched this scene quietly, a flicker of envy in her eyes. Clara is amazing too, I said suddenly. She's got the antique shop running so well and even has an expansion plan. My parents immediately turned their attention to Clara, their faces full of appreciation. Clara really is a good kid. She's been a huge help since she came to live with us. Yeah, a lot better than this rascal Liam, my mom laughed. Liam protested indignantly. Mom, I work hard too, you know. You call that working hard? Clara pushed up her glasses. Yesterday you priced a Ming Dynasty blue and white porcelain vase as if it were from the Qing Dynasty. If I hadn't caught it in time, we would have lost a fortune. Liam immediately deflated. It was just a mistake. The family ate and chatted together, full of warmth and laughter. I suddenly realized that maybe this was the life I truly wanted. No need to prove how much of a genius I was. No need to perform to gain approval, just being here simply with the people who love me. My phone rang. It was the project proposal from Ethan. I casually opened it and skimmed through. It was indeed a very promising project. Clara leaned over for a look, then took my phone and began to read it seriously. This project is good, but the risk allocation is unreasonable, she analyzed as she read. They've shifted most of the risk to the technical partner, which is you. So, what should I do? Renegotiate the terms, Clara said, putting down the phone. You handle the tech, I'll handle the business negotiations. You want to be involved? Why not? She said, as if it were the most obvious thing in the world. Digital preservation of antiques is my area of expertise. I thought for a moment and nodded. Having a business genius like Clara helping out would certainly make things a lot easier. The next day, Ethan contacted me. Ilara, what have you decided? I'm in, but we need to renegotiate the terms of our partnership. There was a moment of silence on the other end of the line. All right, let's schedule a time to meet and discuss it. Okay, but I'll be bringing a partner. A partner? Clara Reed, you should know her. Ethan was clearly stunned for a moment. Miss Reed is also participating in this project? Is that a problem? No, of course not. His voice sounded almost excited. Having Miss Reed on board will greatly increase the project's chances of success. It seemed Clara's reputation in the industry was even bigger than I had thought. After hanging up, I turned to look at Clara, who was organizing some antiques. Ethan agreed. 3 o'clock tomorrow afternoon at his company to discuss the details. Got it, Clara replied without looking up. I'll prepare a new proposal. You're very confident about this project. Digital preservation is the future. If this project succeeds, it will be worth at least $1 billion. She put down the porcelain vase she was holding and turned to face me. Ilara, do you know what your technology means? I shook my head. It can allow antique lovers all over the world to view and study ancient artifacts in high definition online. This isn't just a commercial project. It's a revolution in cultural heritage. Clara's eyes sparkled with light, a passion for her work and a vision for the future. I suddenly understood why the Sterling family had produced someone like Clara. She wasn't just smart. More importantly, she had her own ideals and ambitions. And me? Besides being exceptionally gifted, what did I have? Ilara, Clara seemed to read my mind. Your talent is a gift. But how you choose to use that gift is up to you. I nodded, a decision solidifying in my heart. Perhaps it was time to get serious about my own life.